Good morning. This joint hearing of the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation and the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs will come to order. Good morning and welcome, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time, and I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement right now. Good morning and welcome to today's historic hearing, which I'm co-chairing with Mr. Grothman, whose subcommittee held an important hearing on this topic last year. I want to thank my colleagues on the Oversight Committee, including Mr. Burchett, Mr. Burleson, Ms. Luna, Mr. Moskowitz, Mr. Garcia, for their relentless drive to get answers on UAPs. They've been steadfast in demanding transparency on the sightings reported by military pilots and armed forces. Their commitment to digging for the truth is exactly what this country needs to cut through the secrecy surrounding this issue. And many high-ranking individuals in the military and intelligence communities believe UAPs demand greater attention, and thus the purpose for this hearing today. Former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said on Bill Maher's program that, quote, "there are phenomena that have been witnessed by multiple people that are just inexplicable by the science available to us." Army Colonel Carl Nell, a member of the federal government UAP task force, said at a conference this past May that non-human intelligence exists, non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing, and there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that. But UAPs remain a controversial topic. I'm not going to name names, but there are certain individuals who didn't want this hearing to happen because they feared what might be disclosed. But we stood firm. No amount of outside pressure would ever keep me from pursuing a subject to ground, come hell or high water. On that score, I want to thank our witnesses for being here. We have before us a panel of individuals accomplished in the military, in civilian government, in science, and in journalism. Some of the testimony you will hear them deliver today does not reflect well on influential individuals and agencies within the U.S. federal government and perhaps some of our contractors. It's never easy to present such information publicly, so I appreciate our witnesses voluntarily agreeing to being here today. This hearing is intended to help Congress and the American people to learn the extent of the programs and activities our government has engaged in with respect to UAPs and what knowledge it has yielded. This includes, of course, any knowledge of extraterrestrial life or technology of non-human origin. If government-funded research on UAPs has not yielded any useful knowledge, we also need to know those facts. Taxpayers deserve to know how much has it been invested, how much has been spent. They shouldn't be kept in the dark to spare the Pentagon a little bit of embarrassment. The reality is, despite their enormous taxpayer-funded budgets, the transparency of the Defense Department and the intelligence community have long been abysmal. The Pentagon has failed 6 consecutive audits. In fact, it's never actually passed one. Adding to this is a runaway overclassification of documents and materials, a reluctance to declassify materials when appropriate, and at times an outright refusal to share critical information with Congress. In short, it's not a track record that instills trust. So Congress has tried in recent years to lift the veil and find out if information about UAPs is being withheld, not only from the American public, but also from their elected representatives in Congress. Part of the transparency effort was legislation created in the Pentagon, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, but the new office is struggling to get its footing. A recent statutorily required report from AARO, intended to illuminate the government's historic assessment of UAPs, was heavily criticized by those seeking UAP transparency. The report has stoked suspicions AARO is unable, or perhaps unwilling, to bring forward the truth about the government's activities concerning UAPs. I'm disturbed that AARO itself lacks transparency. Even its budget is kept from the public. So if there is no there, then why are we spending money on it, and by how much? why the secrecy? If it's really no big deal and there's nothing there, why hide it from the American people? Because I'm not a mathematician, but I can tell you that doesn't add up. I expect some of our witnesses to share their views on that AARO report. We will also hear from the witnesses today allegations of UAP-related misinformation and disinformation by government officials of which they are personally aware and directly experienced. And we will hear testimony today concerning recent revelations about a purportedly secret UAP program whose existence and findings may have been improperly withheld from Congress. But before we get to the witnesses, we're going to have a few more opening statements from our colleagues. And one thing I wanted to add at the end of my closing statement is there is a document that will be entered into the congressional record today. Mr. Tim Burchett from Tennessee has this document, and we just distributed it to every member up here on the dais of this document. But this is going to be the original document from the Pentagon about Immaculate Constellation that Michael Shellenberger delivered to Congress today. So thank you, Mr. Shellenberger, for this information. We are all reading it in real time now, and Mr. Burchett will enter it into the record. But 12 pages about this unacknowledged special access program that your government says does not exist. So with that, I would acknowledge my colleagues, Mr. Garcia. I want to say, first of all, to Mr. Connolly, who cannot be here today, the ranking member on my subcommittee on cybersecurity, I want to say that I was greatly saddened to hear about the recent news of Mr. Connolly's cancer diagnosis, and I want to convey to him and to all of our colleagues, we wish our very best to you and a full and speedy recovery. And with that, I would acknowledge Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairwoman. And I want to thank the Chairwoman and the Chairman both for their continued support and really treating this this discussion and these hearings in a way that's bipartisan. I think one thing that's very important for all of us that are interested in the conversation around UAPs is that this is an area that both Republicans and Democrats, where we may disagree in a lot of other spaces, this is an area where bipartisanship is really important. And in fact, I would add it's critical that we all continue to work together in a way that moves forward with the truth and important disclosure. So we're here to have a bipartisan and serious conversation, I believe, about our national security. We should always ground these conversations in facts, evidence, and the data in front of us. I want to note that we have our witnesses here, and I want to thank you all for being here, and note that also amongst you have folks that have also served us in our military. And I know that for many of you, this has been a difficult process, but I'm very grateful to have you with us today, and I thank you for joining us. I also want to note that today's hearing builds on a quite, I think, also historic public hearing that we had many months ago that Mr. Grothman and others helped lead in this very same hearing room, where I believe we began a really important public conversation about UAPs. And so I want to thank him for that, and I especially want to thank Chairwoman Mays for her continued advocacy on this topic. I also want to start with some facts. We know that there are objects or phenomena observed in our airspace, as our witnesses will testify, and also possibly in our oceans. In many cases, we don't know what they are, and this is, of course, why we're discussing UAPs. Now, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, has reported hundreds of UAPs that remain, quote, uncharacterized and unattributed, and which, quote, appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. This is our own AARO office. Now, we shouldn't prejudge what they might be. I'm certainly not going to. We need evidence. But what we are detecting things, and we know that we don't understand them, and this is worth investigating. Now, the American people have legitimate questions, and I believe it's critical that Congress should help address them. This is about the truth and science and facts. Now, transparency and faith in our institutions is vital in a good democracy. Now, I'm proud to say that this hearing will build on that important bipartisan work, and I want to thank everyone for being involved, including members of our committee. Now, in our last hearing in July, we heard testimony that a significant number of pilots of major airlines have witnessed UAPs as well, but have no real confidential way of reporting them to the government. We heard that commercial pilots who encounter UAPs may be hesitant to speak openly due to stigma or fear of retaliation. We also know that AARO has reported that, and I want to quote, that most reports still reflect a bias towards restricted military airspace, a result of reporting from military personnel and sensors present in such areas. And so the lack of ability for civilian pilots raises real safety concerns, and limits our ability to understand UAPs. This is a particular piece of this conversation that I am very interested in. Now, our last hearing inspired us to introduce the Safe Airspace for Americans Act, joined by Chairman Grothwin, Chairwoman Mace, and a bipartisan group of co-sponsors. I see some of our leaders from Safe Airspace for Americans Act here, and that would create a safe reporting for UAP process, which we want to continue to do. Now, members of both parties and senior officials in multiple administrations have now taken an interest in this issue. Mainstream media, in many cases, are beginning to take more of an interest in this issue, and we should all be proud to carry that work and build confidence for the American people. I believe we can always be more transparent. To me, this hearing and others are simply about the truth and getting to the facts of what these UAPs actually are. It's very important that we show that Democrats and Republicans in Congress can work together to cut through misinformation and look for a serious and thoughtful way to have the discussion in public. Many of us have also called for additional public hearings to discuss UAPs. This should be a topic that continues on throughout the Congress so that we can gather more information, data, and work with the relevant agencies to gather more information. Finally, just want to add that those that are here on this dais, many of us have participated also in classified briefings as well, and where we have also gained a lot of important, I think, and interesting information, at least I personally have. And so with that information, we want to continue today's hearing, and I thank all of our witnesses for being here. And with that, I'd like to yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia, and I'd now like to recognize Mr. Grothman for a 5-minute introduction.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here one more time. This is a topic I've been interested in since 8th grade. I'd like to thank Ms. Mace for working with me on this topic and for making this a joint subcommittee hearing. Last year, the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border and Foreign Affairs held an historic hearing to understand the potential national security risk of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. We heard from former Navy Commander David Fravor, who shared firsthand experience with a UAP he engaged while on duty in the Pacific. We learned from David Gresh, a former member of the intelligence community, who revealed the supposed existence of secret government programs hidden from congressional oversight. Additionally, former military pilot Ryan Graves informed us of the limited ways in which the military and commercial pilots can report UAP sightings. Since that last hearings, I've led several briefings with government agencies to deepen my understanding with these issues. First, the Department of Defense Inspector General's Office informed us that the Department of Defense does not have a streamlined process for service members to report UAP activity. Since then, the Joint Chiefs have implemented standards for UAP reporting across the services. The Intelligence Community Inspector General informed us that whistleblowers often fear retaliation for reporting mismanagement of highly sensitive government projects or information. Finally, AARO has expressed to the committee that, like any other federal government agency, it's faced challenges in its establishment, specifically in hiring staff to manage UAP historical records and coordinating with other federal agencies. While these agencies have been helpful to us in understanding the challenges that come from collecting UAP data, none of them have been able to substantiate the claims made at this hearing last year by David Grush. Despite our committee members endlessly questioning these agencies inside and outside of a SCIF. I hope our witnesses today will be able to provide evidence and content that is worthwhile to our pursuits of eliminating government waste and increasing transparency. To help alleviate some of the roadblocks, I'm supportive of measures that were included in last year's National Defense Authorization Act to increase transparency and improve record-keeping measures when it comes to UAPs. But I believe there's still more work to go. I co-led the Safe Airspace for Americans Act with Ranking Member Garcia, which requires the Federal Aviation Administration to develop procedures to collect UAP data from civilian aviators. I look forward to working with members of Congress to see that this legislation and other UAP legislation crosses the finish line. I'm deeply alarmed by the reporting of the massive drone swarm that flew over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia last December. Langley is the home of the 1st Fighter Wing, which maintains half of the F-22s in the U.S. Air Force inventory. Reports of this incident indicate these drones were roughly 20 feet long, flying more than 100 miles an hour at an altitude of over 3,000 feet. yet the origin of these drones and their operators remains a mystery. This incident and other sightings near sensitive military installations highlights the complexity of the UAP challenge facing our intelligence, defense, and homeland security committees. Whether these phenomena are the result of foreign adversaries developing advanced technologies or something else entirely, we must take them seriously, investigate them thoroughly, and assess their implications on national defense. The repeated UAP sightings around sensitive military sites underscores the need for innovative defensive strategies beyond traditional measures. They also highlight the urgent need for updated policies to address emerging threats as well as more effective interagency cooperation and intelligence sharing. However, none of this is going to be possible without transparency. For far too long, critical information about UAPs has been either classified or ignored, leaving the American public and key congressmen without clarity needed to make informed decisions. Declassifying reports and fostering a more open dialogue about UAPs will not only increase the public trust, but also encourage collaboration between government, the scientific community, and our allies. Quite frankly, there's been things that have been kept secret that is, I think, old enough that there is no reason it shouldn't be released, regardless of any so-called, private information. A transparent approach will allow us to share insights, identify patterns, and develop new strategic defenses. As we continue to investigate these phenomena, we must do so with a mindset of protecting our country, advancing scientific discovery, and upholding the trust of the American people, who right now I don't think have trust, and it's just obvious. I don't have trust. We cannot shy away from the unknown, especially when the stakes are so high. I look forward to discussing these matters with the witnesses today. I'm hopeful we can learn from the testimony and come out of this hearing with actionable ideas to advance UAP transparency. Actually, the idea is just to say, in my mind, go back 15 years and everything has to be released. I'm hopeful that we can learn from their testimony and come out of this hearing. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Moskowitz for a 5-minute introduction.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning, everyone. I first want to thank the chairs and ranking members for holding the hearing today on this topic and, again, having a second hearing. I want to thank the witnesses for coming forward today to share your expertise on UAPs and the need to build trust through transparency. But first, I want to mention, you might be wondering why Chairman Comer has allowed me to be a ranking member today, but it's really only because our dear friend, Jerry Connolly, is not here. As Chairwoman Mace mentioned, he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and all of us on this committee know Jerry, and he's a fighter, and we're praying for him and hoping for his speedy recovery. So today's hearing marks this committee's second meeting dedicated to UAP transparency. I was pleased, as I know all of us are, on the bipartisanship that existed in last year's hearing, and even though we can't talk about what happens in the classified settings, the bipartisanship that has existed in those settings with the questions members have asked. Last year's hearing was a great example of open dialogue about UAPs, and we must remain committed to sharing information with the American people. And I think you see that commitment based on the people here and the commitment across the political spectrum. I personally have worked with multiple members of this committee, but I want to particularly thank Congressman Burchett, Mace, Luna, and Garcia for working on bipartisan pieces of legislation. In recent years, Congress has taken numerous bipartisan steps towards greater transparency. In 2022, in the NDAA, we created the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to investigate unidentified flying objects. Following Aero, along with ODNI, released an unclassified report on UAP sightings. Of the 366 sightings included in the report, 171 remain uncharacterized, with some of these appearing to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. That's a nice way of saying we don't want to tell you what they are. In March, Aero revealed a report on the historical record of U.S. government involvement with UAPs, which covered investigatory efforts going back from 1945 to the present day. Earlier this year, I joined Congressman Burchett to introduce the UAP Transparency Act, which would require the declassification of all documents related to UAPs with many other members of this committee. In fiscal year 2024, the NDAA required the National Archives and Records Administration to establish the Unidentified Anonymous Phenomena Records Collection. This collection will include digital copies of all unidentified UAP records that can be publicly disclosed. This commitment in transparency is vitally important, and unnecessary overclassification has led to a void of information, which has allowed theories over the decades to foster. When the American people and members of Congress ask, are reports of UAPs credible, we're met with stonewalling. We're met with responses of, I can't tell you. And in fact, we're met with people not wanting us to have hearings. We're met with people not wanting us to ask you questions. In fact, many of us were told not to ask some of you certain questions on certain topics. In a time of heightened distrust of our government institutions, I believe more transparency is not only needed, but is possible. And obviously we can respect national security limits, but we also have to provide our constituents with the information and oversight that they have tasked us for. As part of this, government agencies must maintain open lines of communication with members of Congress. And there are regular questions that Americans have. What are UAPs? Are they real? Are they ours? How has this technology been developed? How do they get funded? Right? And now we've seen this has gone from a long time ago where you could discredit people because it's some guy living in a Winnebago. You're able to see people now, these are pilots, these are military, these are folks with serious backgrounds. This has changed the face of this because now we have video. People will have questions. We know there are advanced technology programs. Almost 15 years ago, one of those came out of Area 51 to go after Osama bin Laden. And the only reason we know about that is because one of those helicopters was downed. Americans have questions about whistleblowers who have come forward to talk about retribution. And so I want to thank everyone for being involved today on trying to get more transparency. This has been bipartisan, bicameral, and as we get into a new administration, the president-elect has talked about opportunities to declassify information on UAPs, and I hope he lives up to that promise. And with that, I yield back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moskowitz. And I would now, committee staff asked me to go ahead and I will do it, to enter into the congressional record this 12-page document that Michael Shellenberger brought today that describes the Immaculate Constellation government program. So we will do that now. Every member up here has a copy of it. The first section talks about the unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation, and the second section about USG imagery intelligence. And Representative Luna just told me if I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list. Maybe a FISA warrant, so come at me, bro, I guess. But without objection, entered in the record. All right, so next we will introduce our witnesses for today's hearing. Thank you so much for being here. Our first witness is retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who retired from the U.S. Navy and is now the Chief Executive Officer at Ocean STL Consulting. Our second witness is Mr. Lou Elizondo, a former Department of Defense official and author of a recent bestseller book about UAPs. Our third witness is Mr. Michael Shellenberger, founder of the newsletter Public and author of a recent journalistic piece about special access programs, including one widely identified as Immaculate Constellation. I swear the staff wants me on a list. Okay. And our last witness today is Mr. Michael Gold, a former NASA official who is also a member of the NASA UAP Independent Study Team. Welcome, everyone. We are pleased to have you today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise your right hands. This is where it gets real. Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. We appreciate all of you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. You guys may be seated. Please limit your oral statements to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button in front of you so the microphone is turned on so that everyone in the room, members included, can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes has expired, and we would ask that you please wrap it up. So I will first recognize Rear Admiral Gallet to please begin your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP. Confirmation that UAPs are real came to me in January of 2015 when I was serving as the commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. At the time, my personnel were participating in a pre-deployment naval exercise off the U.S. East Coast. It included the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group, and this exercise was overseen by the United States Fleet Forces Command, led by a 4-star admiral who at the time was also my superior officer. During this exercise, I received an email on the Navy's secure network from the operations officer of U.S. Fleet Forces Command. The email was addressed to all the subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, "Urgent Safety of Flight Issue." The text of the email was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, "If any of you know what these are, tell me ASAP. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve this soon, we are going to have to shut down the exercise." Attached to the email is what is now known as the Go Fast video, captured on the forward-looking infrared sensor of one of the Navy F-A-18 aircraft participating in the exercise. The now declassified video showed an unidentified object exhibiting flight and structural characteristics unlike anything in our arsenal. The implication of the email was clear. The author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of classified technology demonstrations that could explain these objects. Because the DoD policy is to rigorously deconflict such demonstrations with live exercises, I was confident this was not the case. The very next day, that email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients without explanation. Moreover, the commander of Fleet Forces Command and the operations officer never discussed the subject. Even during weekly meetings specifically designed to address issues affecting exercises like the one in which the Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group was participating. This lack of follow-up was very concerning to me. As the Navy's chief meteorologist at the time, I was responsible for reducing safety of flight risks. Yet it appeared to me that no one at the flag officer level was addressing the safety risk posed by UAPs. Instead, pilots were left to mitigate these threats on their own without guidance or support. I concluded that the UAP information must have been classified within a special access program managed by an intelligence agency. That is a compartmented program that even senior officials, including myself, were not read into. Last year's UAP hearing before this oversight committee confirmed that UAP-related information is being withheld from senior officials and members of Congress. And just this week, I learned from former DoD official Chris Mellon that satellite imagery of UAP from a few years ago still has not been shared with Congress. Equally concerning, last year's UAP hearing also revealed that elements of the government are engaged in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Having never signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding UAPs, and now as a private citizen, I've become an advocate for greater UAP transparency from the government. The continued overclassification surrounding UAPs has not only hindered our ability to effectively address these phenomena, but has also eroded trust in our institutions. While I applaud previous bipartisan legislation passed by Congress concerning UAPs, a more comprehensive approach is needed to address the broader implication of UAP on public safety and national security, as well as the socioeconomic opportunities that open UAP research could unlock. Therefore, I recommend Congress take the following action, which I believe will receive bipartisan support. First, establish robust oversight of the executive branch's management of UAP information by directing key officials, beginning with the director of the DoD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, to provide comprehensive briefings on what the government knows about UAP and does not know. Two, enact the provisions of the UAP Disclosure Act that establish a UAP Records Review Board to ensure independent oversight, transparency, and accountability in the government's handling of UAP information. And three, strengthen the UAP Disclosure Act and future reauthorizations with provisions that mandate a whole-of-government approach to addressing UAP. In closing, I will share my personal reasons for speaking out on this topic. First, as a former science agency leader, having led the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I've always sought the truth in human knowledge and thought. Now that we know UAP are interacting with humanity, and these include unidentified submerged objects in the ocean, we should not turn a blind eye, but instead boldly face this new reality and learn from it. Additionally, at a time when leaders in government leave much to be desired, I feel obligated to show moral leadership on this issue of UAP disclosure by validating the credibility of the courageous men and women who have come out as witnesses and whistleblowers to expose the truth. My speaking out has encouraged others to do the same, and it's my hope over time that a number of your constituents will want to know the truth and about UAP, and this number will increase to such an extent that the congressional action I've just recommended will become inevitable. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I will now recognize Mr. Elizondo for his opening statement.
Greetings, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, and members of the committee. It is my honor and privilege to testify before you on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, formerly known as UFOs. On behalf of our brave men and women in uniform and across the intelligence community, as well as my fellow Americans who have awaited this day, thank you for your leadership on this important matter. Let me be clear, UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. For many years, I was entrusted with protecting some of our nation's most sensitive programs. In my last position, I managed a special access program on behalf of the White House and the National Security Council. As such, I appreciate the need to protect certain sensitive intelligence and military information. I consider my oath to protect secrets as sacred, and I will always put the safety of the American people first. With that said, I also understand the consequences of excessive secrecy and stovepiping. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the aftermath of 9/11, which many of us remember all too well. I believe that America's greatness depends on three elements: A, a watchful Congress, B, a responsive executive branch, and C, an informed public. Over the last decade and a half, I learned that certain UAP programs were and are operating without any of these elements. Although much of my government work on the UAP subject still remains classified, excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos. A small cadre within our own government involved in the UAP topic has created a culture of suppression and intimidation that I've personally been victim to, along with many of my former colleagues. This includes unwarranted criminal investigations, harassment, and efforts to destroy one's credibility. Most Americans would be shocked to learn that the Pentagon's very own Public Affairs Office openly employs a professional psychological operations officer as the singular point of contact for any UAP-related inquiries from citizens and the media. This is unacceptable. Many of my former colleagues and I have provided classified testimony to both the Department of Defense and the Intelligence Community Inspector General, and many of us have subsequently been targeted by this cabal with threats to our careers, our security clearances, and even our lives. This is not hyperbole, but a genuine fact, and this is wrong. To fix these problems, I propose three principal actions. First, Congress and the President should create a single point of contact responsible for a whole-of-government approach to the UAP issue. Currently, the White House, CIA, NASA, the Pentagon, Department of Energy, and others play a role, but no one seems to be in charge, leading to unchecked power and corruption. Second, we need a national UAP strategy that will promote transparency and help restore the American public's trust at a time when the public's trust is at an all-time low. This strategy should include a whole-of-government approach, including the academic and scientific communities, the private sector, and our international partners and allies. Third, Congress should create a protected environment so whistleblowers desperate to do the right thing can come forward without fear. As it currently stands, these whistleblowers suffer because of stigma, a code of silence, and concerns about retaliation. These whistleblowers should be encouraged to come forward in ways that protect them against any forms of retaliation. Policies and procedures should ensure that protection, and for those who refuse to cooperate, it is up to the members of this committee and the other lawmakers to wield their subpoena power against hostile witnesses and prevent additional government funding to those UAP efforts that remain hidden from congressional oversight. In closing, we as Americans have never been afraid of a challenge. In fact, we thrive on them, whether it's eradicating polio or going to the moon. We don't run from a challenge, we take it head on. To the incoming administration and Congress, I say to you, we need immediate public transparency, and this hearing is an important step on that journey. If we approach the UAP topic in the same way as we, as Americans, have met other challenges, we can restore our faith in our government institutions. Together, we can usher in a new era of accountable government and scientific discovery. I believe that we as Americans can handle the truth, and I also believe the world deserves the truth. Thank you, esteemed members of Congress, for your time today. It is profoundly appreciated by many.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent for Representatives Ogles of Tennessee and Boebert of Colorado to be waived onto the subcommittee for today's joint subcommittee hearing for the purpose of asking questions. Without objection, so ordered. I would now like to recognize Mr. Shellenberger for his introductory remarks.
Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Connolly, Ranking Member Garcia, members of the subcommittees, thank you for inviting my testimony. One of Congress's most important responsibilities is oversight of the executive branch in general and the military and intelligence community in particular. Unfortunately, there is a growing body of evidence that the U.S. government is not being transparent about what it knows about unidentified anomalous phenomena, and that elements within the military and the IC are in violation of their constitutional duty to notify Congress of their operations. President-elect Donald Trump and former President Barack Obama have both said that the government has information about UAPs that it has not released. There are other explanations for UAPs than that they represent a new form of life or non-human life. Current dominant alternative theories, including those put forward by AARO, are that UAPs are some kind of natural phenomena we don't yet understand, like ball lightning or plasma. They could also be part of some new U.S. or foreign government weapons programs, such as drones, aircraft, balloons, CGI, hoaxes, or birds. Whatever UAPs are, Congress must be informed, as must the people of the United States. We have a right to know what UAPs are, no matter what they are. However, we now have existing and former U.S. government officials who have told Congress that AARO and the Pentagon have broken the law by not revealing a significant body of information about UAPs, including military intelligence databases that have evidence of their existence as physical craft. One of those individuals is a current or former U.S. government official acting as a UAP whistleblower. This person has written a report. This is the report that says the executive branch has been managing UAP, NHI issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization for some time, quite possibly decades. Furthermore, these individuals have revealed the name of an active and highly secretive DoD unacknowledged special access program, or USAP. The source of that document told me, that the USAP is a strategic intelligence program that is part of the U.S. military family of longstanding, highly sensitive programs dealing with various aspects of the UAP problem. The new UAP whistleblower claims that the U.S. military and IC database includes videos and images taken using infrared, forward-looking infrared, full-motion video, and still photography. The report that was just shared with Congress says Immaculate Constellation serves as a central or parent USAP that consolidates observations of UAPs by both tasked and untasked collection platforms. Immaculate Constellation includes high-quality imagery intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence of UAPs, the whistleblower's report adds. The sources of this intelligence are a blend of directed and incidental collection capabilities, positioned in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, as well as military and civilian aviation altitudes and maritime environments. The report to Congress details in detail various UAPs, including spheres, orbs, disks, saucers, ovals, triangles, boomerang, arrowhead, and irregular organic. The report describes various incidents found in the human intelligence databases. One involved orbs surrounding and enforcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. In another incident, the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier watched a small orange-red sphere rapidly descend from a high altitude of 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of the CVN, or aircraft carrier. And since my reporting on this Immaculate Constellation last month, another source came forward who told me that they saw a roughly 13-minute long high-definition, full-color video of a white orb UAP coming out of the ocean approximately 20 miles off the coast of Kuwait. It was filmed from a helicopter. Then halfway through the video, the person said the orb is joined by another orb that briefly comes into the frame from the left before rapidly moving again out of the frame. The person discovered the video on SIPR, the Secure Internet Protocol Router Network, which the DoD uses to transmit classified information. A leading UAP researcher who utilizes the Freedom of Information Act to find out what the government knows, John Greenwald, told me last year that the U.S. government had been increasingly denying his requests for UAP information. He has been doing FOIA requests for 27 years and has an archive of 3 million pages. The government has for decades denied any interest in UFOs, he told me, but the documents that he has assembled show that behind the scenes, it was a completely different story. Contrary to the hopes of many advocates of transparency, the government has been restricting more information since the leak of 3 UAP videos in 2017. The DoD organization AARO has been labeling many documents with a B7 exemption, which Greenwald says does not make any sense. They're stating that anything AARO does is involved in law enforcement investigation, which allows AARO to not release it. Greenwald says that the DoD has denied the existence of a UAP and ATIP-related records on multiple occasions, only to acknowledge them after an appeal was filed. He added that the Naval Air Systems Command in March 2022 stated they found no additional UAP videos. It seemed strange that they had 3 and only those 3, but other requests had been filed by the Black Vault, that's John Greenwald's group, to seek out more places UAPs might be hiding. Then in September 2022, the Navy admitted that the UAP-related videos and photographs existed, but denied the request in full for their release, saying that the requested videos contain sensitive information that are classified and exempt from disclosure. The DoD will deny things on a Monday and then admit to it on a Friday, said Greenwald. He said the government can and does release videos that protect secret methods of capturing it. They fall back on the sensitive platform excuse a lot, he said. However, the on-screen information can be blurred and scrubbed. The metadata can be removed. I'll show you this example here. This is a presentation from the UATP task force. This is completely absurd. It's nuts, this level of censorship, of redaction on a document. It shows the redaction of how many reports they've collected, for how many years. 2 of the 3 potential explanations are blacked out. The Pentagon, the intelligence community is treating us like children. It's time for us to know the truth about this. I think that we can handle it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would now like to recognize Mr. Gold for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, Ranking Members Connolly and Garcia, Representative Moskowitz, and distinguished members of both subcommittees. I'm grateful to all of you, as well as your intrepid staff, for the opportunity to testify, and would like to begin by discussing courage. Courage is what it takes to tackle this topic, and courage in the face of adversity is what I see in front of me, beside me, and behind me. Per my introduction, I am currently the Chief Growth Officer at Redwire Space and have had several leadership positions at NASA. That being said, I want to be clear that I am speaking exclusively on my own behalf and not for Redwire, NASA, or any other organization. However, I am here today to speak out for science. Science requires data, which should be collected without bias or prejudice. Yet, whenever the topic of UAP arises, those who wish to explore the phenomena are often confronted with resistance and ridicule. For example, members of the NASA UAP Independent Study Team, particularly those in academia, were mocked and even threatened for simply having the temerity to engage in the study of UAP. Our best tool for unlocking the mystery of UAP is science, but we cannot conduct a proper inquiry if the stigma is so overwhelming that just daring to be part of a NASA research team elicits such a vitriolic response. Therefore, one of the most important actions that can be taken relative to exposing the truth of UAP is to combat the stigma. And this is where I believe that NASA can be eminently helpful. The NASA brand is synonymous with hope, optimism, and credibility. If you were to take a walk down the National Mall, you would immediately see the NASA logo on t-shirts, hats, and bumper stickers. Few federal agencies enjoy this kind of popularity. I've never seen anyone wearing an Office of Personnel Management t-shirt, which is why NASA could play such an influential role. Specifically, NASA could, with relatively little cost and effort, host symposia on UAP, or even just participate in existing panels examining the topic. NASA personnel stepping forward and participating in such discussions would make a powerful statement to the scientific community that UAP should be taken seriously and researched accordingly. In regard to research, NASA has vast archives, much of which may contain important UAP data. Again, for relatively little cost and effort, NASA could create an AI or ML algorithm that could search the agency's archives for anomalous phenomena. I suspect that such an effort would not only result in information that will help us to understand UAP, but could result in data that will assist in other areas of scientific inquiry, such as anomalous weather or meteorite activity. Beyond its existing archives, NASA could act as a clearinghouse for civilian and commercial UAP data. During my work on the UAP Independent Study Team, it quickly became evident that there is no clear or well-publicized process for civilian pilots to report UAP sightings. The stigma associated with UAP hampers the number of pilots that would report such phenomena, but even for those who overcome the stigma, I believe the current FAA guidance is largely unknown and poorly understood. In order to effectively collect UAP data, the independent study team recommended the use of NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System, or ASRS. This system, which is administered by NASA and funded by the FAA, provides a confidential means for the reporting of safety violations in a voluntary and non-punitive manner. Over 47 years, the ASRS has collected nearly 2 million reports. ASRS is the perfect tool to collect UAP data, which could then be collated by NASA and shared with the public at large. Leveraging ASRS could create a treasure trove of UAP data, potentially hundreds of thousands of reports, supporting this hearing's goal of exposing the truth. And I'm grateful to our two co-chairs and other members who have already incorporated this idea into proposed legislation. At this hearing, and as others have demonstrated, the UAP issue is justifiably dominated by national security and defense. However, I would urge the subcommittees to keep in mind the numerous ways that NASA and the FAA, as well as commercial activities in the air, in space, and in the water, can generate a massive amount of invaluable data on anomalous phenomena. I cannot help but be excited by the potential for such an endeavor, since scientific discovery is driven by anomalies. It's the existence and study of anomalies that led to the theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, and nearly all of humanity's scientific breakthroughs. This is why the study of UAPs should be embraced, since whatever is occurring, the chance to garner new knowledge should never be ignored. We must be thorough in collecting information, fearless in making conclusions, and open to following the data, no matter how mundane or extraordinary the results may be. I began this testimony by praising the Joint Subcommittee members for their courage, and I will end by echoing that sentiment. As the saying goes, the truth is out there. We just need to be bold enough and brave enough to face it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. I have a lot of questions, and I have a lot of witnesses. So I would just ask, if it's yes or no, to please just tell me yes or no. If it requires more than that, be very succinct, because I would like to go down the line and ask as many questions as possible. So for the Admiral this morning first, former DoD official Chris Mellon reached out to you about satellite imagery from 2017 that depicts a UAP. What were the dates in 2017 when this occurred?
I can't share with you the details, ma'am, but I can do it in a closed setting, and I can also tell you the agency that wrote a report on it.
Okay, so who has the imagery?
I can tell you that in a closed setting.
Can you describe what was depicted in the satellite imagery? Just a description.
It was a UAP, ma'am.
That's it? No other description?
The term that the analysts used, they called it the button. It was a disc-shaped object.
Okay, where was it?
I can't tell you that, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay, Mr. Elizondo, you stated in your testimony that, quote, advanced technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, to put this in perspective,
are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
Okay.
When it comes to Blue Force Technologies, I would not be able to discuss
Okay.
that.
Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am. I signed documentation 3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes,
Okay, were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
yes.
Does the U.S. government have any reverse, okay, we already answered that question about retrieval programs. Do any U.S. contractors have the same?
I would prefer to address that in a closed session, ma'am.
Okay. In your book, you mentioned government employees who've been injured by UAPs, placed on leave, and receiving government compensation for their injuries. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How can the government deny we have recovered craft if they're paying people because they've been injured by recovered craft?
Ma'am, that's a great question. That's why I think we're here again, because I've seen the documentation by the U.S. government for several of these individuals who have sustained injuries as a result of a UAP incident.
It's a crazy idea, right? The hypocrisy and the logic. Okay, Mr. Shellenberger, I'm going to say it again to be very clear. Immaculate Constellation. What's its mission and how are they funded?
Its mission is to, as I stated, its mission is to, it's an unacknowledged special access program. Its mission is to document UAPs.
Okay, and do you, for your story and your report, do you have more than one credible source?
I do.
Sourcing, okay.
I do.
And then why do you believe your sources to be credible? How do you judge the veracity of the documentation you've been provided about this program?
I checked the sources, and they are who they say they are. They are current or former government officials. I wanted to also add that I did not specify that they were Defense Department employees. I didn't specify the agency nor the gender.
Would they have included non-government employees, people that aren't employed by the government?
These are, I'm comfortable saying that these are government or previously government employees.
Any of them currently employed by a private contractor or private contractors?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. What's the key takeaway, just a few seconds, about the Immaculate Constellation document you provided us today?
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy...
Significant safety concerns. And to almost call out and exercise it and shut it down, which is very compressed, and the carrier's getting ready for deployment, and the pilots have to get certified to land on a carrier, it's extreme, to say the least.
All right, I have two last questions. Real quickly, Mr. Shellenberger, how do we get more whistleblowers to come forward?
Well, this hearing does, is very important, and obviously, I can't encourage whistleblowers to obtain information, but I can guarantee that I will protect them and go to prison to protect their identities if they come to me.
Yes, sir. Okay, my last question. The first hearing we had on this, I'd never been briefed on UAPs or what they were, biologics, non-human, et cetera. How would you define, each of you, my last question, how would you define non-human biologics, non-human intelligence? What are we actually talking about? Admiral, and we'll go down the line.
I don't think it's a stretch when you look at the diversity of life on this planet and the size of this universe to think that there would be more diverse, higher order, non-human intelligences throughout the universe, and that's probably what's visiting us.
I would take the scientific approach. The definition would be the ability to react to a stimulus in a manner that requires an intellectual thought process.
I just don't know.
I think we must be modest in our assumptions that we're looking for intelligence. That could be biological, it might not.
Non-biological, but what non-biological intelligence, what does that mean, though?
Artificial intelligence, ML, machines. We assume that all intelligence would be like us, and every time we look out in the universe, we are humbled relative to what we don't know in terms of the forms of intelligence and what it may take. I can assure you I probably can't ask you your question, but I think the ultimate answer is going to surprise us all.
And then Mr. Garcia, you had a few closing remarks.
And I know we're about to hit votes here, so I'll be brief. Just, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Chairwoman Mace especially for holding this important bipartisan hearing. And I want to thank all the committee members that are interested in this topic. I think our commitment to all of you and all the folks that have contacted us, and certainly to the advocates and the pilots, is that we need to continue investigating UAPs. I think the country the country is owed explanations and to ensure that the safety of national security is always protected. This is a conversation and questioning that must continue, so I'm very grateful to all of you. And I also just want to add, just personally, I think it's really important for me, two things guide my questioning and my observations on UAPs. One is we should always be guided by facts, science, and data, and stay serious on those issues. And the second thing is I think that we should not limit our imagination and our thoughts and our curiosity on what UAPs could actually be. And I think those two things for me are really important, and I'm grateful for all of you to be here. So with that, I yield back.
Okay, and we have Mr. Ogles, who is on the way. He's going to be here any second. Is that correct? Want to check, and he'll be the last member with questions that we have today, and then we have votes. So we want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Mr. Garcia and folks on both sides of the aisle for being here today and being patient. We have a lot more questions, and I hope that this will open the door to more hearings in the future. I obviously would like to know how much taxpayers are spending on this. You have the right to know, but also if we're spending money on something that doesn't exist, why are we spending the money? And if it does exist, why are we hiding it from the public? And of course, our national security is a huge issue, because if there's technology that could harm us or our allies that are in the hands of our adversaries, we obviously want to stay ahead of that to the best of our ability to ensure that that technology is not in the hands of someone who could use it against us or our allies anywhere in the world. So, Mr. Ogles, you're just in time, babe. I will recognize you for 5 minutes of questioning before we head on out today.
Well, thank you all for being here, and Madam Chairwoman, I'm out of breath because I sprinted to get here, but this is an important hearing. I think we all know that there's something going on. Mr. Elizondo, based on your knowledge of UAP sightings, do you believe it's fair to say that they are especially common near nuclear sites?
Yes, sir. Mr. Congressman, I absolutely am convinced of that, as are my colleagues inside the government.
And the reason why I pose that question, and this has been one of my talking points from the beginning, is, Oak Ridge is in Tennessee. The so-called weather balloon that drifted, that we now know was controlled, it passed near Oak Ridge. It obviously is a sensitive site, both of interest to our adversaries and to whatever else this is. Because we know that at military installations, at sensitive locations, such as nuclear facilities, that we're seeing this take place. So the question is what is it? Do you believe they've caused an irregular activity, and why might they be interested in those sites?
Sir, in some cases, it's actually regular activity. You'd be surprised. There's actually documentation right now that's been submitted. It's not just Oak Ridge. It's Savannah River Site, SRS. It's also Los Alamos. A lot of our sensitive R&D locations appear to be under some sort of surveillance and monitoring. Why? Well, because a lot of innovation comes out of those areas, a lot of new technologies, a lot of, if you will, disruptive technologies that we use for our national defense originates out of those locations, and advanced concepts in physics as well. So if I was doing any type of reconnaissance, even on a foreign adversary, that's a great target to start with.
Sure, and again, this has been one of my talking points. I do have questions. What role might the Department of Energy or its subsidiaries or affiliates have in this type of technology, or possessing this type of technology, whether it's ours or others? Mr. Gallet, I think your testimony has been pretty clear, but would you please reiterate that do you believe UAPs pose a threat to pilots? Excuse me.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. They were threatening Navy pilots during the exercise that my people were involved with in 2015, and it's my understanding they're risking pilot safety, commercial and military, today.
Well, considering, and I understand that there's a need in some cases to keep certain technologies secret, but you believe that it is posing a threat to our personnel, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's reasonable to conclude that if there's a threat to our personnel who are serving our country faithfully, that there be oversight.
100%, Congressman. And in fact, that's the one thing that we've not talked about enough during this hearing is the fact that the government executive branch not sharing with Congress what it knows about UAP infringes on your legislative and oversight responsibilities to such an extent that's very concerning. I mean, what else are we, if you look at national security or intelligence or foreign affairs or appropriations, you all have oversight and legislative responsibility regarding those. This UAP issue may be the greatest issue of our time, and it's being hid from you.
Well, I mean, and to your point, I think we've seen over the decades that we have certain adversaries like China, like Russia, that technologically speaking are not as advanced as us, that they lack some of the lethality that we have, and that we've seen that they've gone after our technologies and in some cases succeeded, in particular with missile technology. And so again, my concern, whether this technology emanates from us or otherworldly, that we know that we possess it. And where's the accountability? Where are the stopgaps? What are the guarantees that if this were to fall in enemy hands that it isn't immediately weaponized against us? And I'll say this, it is clear from my experience and what I've seen that there is something out there. The question is it ours? Is it someone else's? Or is it otherworldly? And Madam Chairman, I would posit that as the legislative body, as the regulatory body, we must know. And anyone who prevents us from gaining access to that information, I would consider that criminality. Because we have U.S. personnel who may very well be in harm's way. We have technology that ultimately may threaten our very existence. With that, Madam Chairman, I thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ogles. And with that and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.